But it doesn't seem fair to have trans people and cis people competing against each other. Like, trans women seems like they'll probably have unfair advantages. Trans men will never be competitive.
Hello?
Hello, Fetchus. How's it going?
Hey, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Pretty good. So I had a couple things that I wanted to take you up on. I saw you did a debate with a trans woman a little while ago.
Okay.
And I think your position was that trans women in sports, you were basically against that or not in favor of that?
I'm skeptical that trans women are competing on the same level as cis women is my skepticism there.
Okay, I think that's fair. So I think, are you aware of somebody named Joanna Harper?
Nope.
So this person is a medical physicist, and she's an advisor for the International
what does
Olympic
that
Committee.
mean? A medical physicist?
I don't know. So I would have figured that'd be something completely different, but apparently it has to do with judging physiology, or estimating physiology. And according to her, this isn't really like, shouldn't probably be news to anybody, but the use of testosterone blockers and estrogen reduces like things like strength, speed, and endurance.
Yep.
That's kind of not surprising. So we might assume that a trans person on average might be somewhere in between a cisgender woman and a cisgender man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there might be something in the middle. So in that case, it wouldn't be a good thing either way if they were competing against men or women.
Yeah, correct.
Like,
You'd
I don't
basically
want
be
to
fucking them over hardcore. A trans woman could never probably compete with like cis men.
Yeah, like Blair White versus Conor McGregor would be probably an unethical fight to have.
I think it'd be very ethical, but it wouldn't be fair. But I know, Sean, yeah. What about it?
Okay, so my position on that basically is just that we're using gender as a shorthand for other traits that we care about, like characteristics that we care about.
Sure.
And it would be easy enough to just try to specify those traits.
Well,
and
that
rather
would be
than
very difficult, but you could
it'd
theoretically
be
do it,
difficult. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I mean, like, so if we're gonna care a lot about these very edge cases, which is what we're doing, we might as well take that effort, because I mean, there are other examples. Like, so for example, I have some shit written down. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
No problem.
I hear that if you mention that you're nervous, it helps you be less nervous. So
Is that true?
apparently, I've heard that that's true.
Well, do you
Let's see.
feel less nervous right now?
Maybe I'll wait a little bit.
Okay.
I'll let you know.
All right.
So have you heard of Castor Semenya?
Yes. Intersex individual, yeah.
No. So she's not intersex.
I'm
She
almost
just
positive she's intersex. I would have to look it up again, but I think people represent all the time that she's a cis woman, but I'm almost positive that she's intersex. Like, I think she was born with internal testes or something, but I could go back and look it up. But like, she's always displayed, or when trans people bring her up, they always say that she's a cisgender woman, but it's almost for sure that she's an intersex individual. If you contest that, we can look it up right now if you want.
It's so for the point of my example, it doesn't really matter, because I'm 99% sure what she has is an androgen disorder.
Okay.
And this androgen disorder, I believe she definitely does exist. So regardless of whether or not she is,
Isn't
an
she
example of it.
actually? I could be wrong, but isn't she an XY female?
Yeah, or no, or I don't know. I could be wrong, but I've never heard her represented as a trans or an intersex person.
Okay.
But
an XXY female is what they say she is. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, but for the point of this example, it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
Because there's such a thing as an androgen disorder, where a cisgender female will essentially go through what you might call a male puberty.
Okay.
And so this problem would exist if we pay attention to these very like outskirt, like niche things or like niche problems. We would have to do it on both sides, and
Of course.
that seems untenable as well. So to me, it makes more sense to just specify the specific traits which differ by sport and go by that instead of gender as a shorthand.
Sure, you could do that.
Yeah. Well, so basically, like,
champion. Sorry, go ahead. This is
I
like.
think that
Or sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say I think that's the only tenable solution. So I mean,
Yeah, we
excluding
could do
them
that, but like
from-
that's like never gonna happen. So it's like almost not even worth talking about, right? That we're no longer gonna do men's and girls sports. Instead, we're just going to like measure everybody's individual physiology to see if they qualify for like a certain division. I seriously doubt that would ever happen.
Well, so it's done differently in a variety of sports. So the sport that I skateboarded before I was like a streamer and went to school. They just went by
Take my
like
Bezos
self-assessment, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and then when you're a professional, you have amateur and professional leagues. I mean, like there are endless. We don't only divide things by gender to decide things.
Sure, but we need to roughly divide most sports by gender in order for them to like work, right? Do you agree with that, or do you not agree with that?
I don't think I agree with that, but
so you think that like women could be competitive with men like in most sports?
So how I think it would end up turning out is that things would be roughly segregated by sex anyway, just based on those specifications. Because in some sports, those specifications do a pretty good job. So I mean,
so
like
every woman would be
MMA,
like an amateur league, and every man would be like pro league, or it seems like not a good.
No. So like we have gender leagues right now. Some people, I mean, if we changed it to based on the physiology, I think that most women would probably be in what we now call the female league anyway. But there would be exceptions and all of that. So it would look roughly similar. But what the problem we could get around is saying that trans women are men. I mean, that'd be a nice problem to get around. And we could also account for XXY or just people with androgen disorders.
So how would we separate it again? So what would be the suggested thing be?
It's whatever's relevant to the sport. I mean,
Okay.
Like,
I mean, if we could do, I don't disagree. There's no argument here. Like, if we could do that, like politically, that would be interesting. I don't see that happening at all. That people are going to like abandon like the male-female division and then go for some other measurement instead. I never see that happening. But if we did, that'd be fine. Sure.
Okay. Well, how do you think that this should be resolved in lieu of that solution?
I think that right now, it seems like it's not a big enough problem that maybe you could get away with ignoring it. But I don't know. Maybe like I'd say maybe trans only categories, but that's not really fair either because every trans person is going to be unique based on when they transition and whatnot.
That's not fair, and there's not enough people in like the MMA that are transgender for that to be. Yeah. There'd be like 2 people competing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. But it doesn't seem fair to have trans people and cis people competing against each other. Like, trans women seems like they'll probably have unfair advantages. Trans men will never be competitive. Like, seems like not a good middle ground.
No, I agree with that. That's why I think we have to propose something different. I think it's, if we want to care about edge cases, then I think it's imperative that we come up with some different system. But okay, so it seems like we don't entirely disagree.
Okay.
So the other thing, or the main other thing that I wanted to talk about was your stance on moral philosophy. But I'm kind of terrified because through browsing like your catalog of previous videos, I cannot really figure out exactly what you believe. So, I mean, I have egoist down. Do you describe yourself as an egoist?
Yeah, descriptively, I think.
You're a descriptive egoist.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like I think that's like how things like start themselves out, but I don't think that like morally that maybe that's like how we ought to do it. I just think that's what tends to happen all the time.
Okay. So I guess my problem with descriptive egoism is it doesn't have any behavioral implications.
Like in terms of like what you ought to do, like in terms of like moral prescriptions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think moral prescriptions are whatever the fuck you want them to be. I don't really believe like in meta ethics. I don't think that ought statements like exist. Like I don't think moral statements are reducible to any kind of fact of the world. I think they're all reduced to some emotional point of view. So I'd be like a non-cognitivist, I guess.
No, yeah, I mean that's almost certainly true. I mean, morality doesn't refer to something that exists externally. I mean that's clearly true. Mm-hmm. I guess my problem is I've heard I've heard you make arguments, particularly against, I think it's like a vegan bodybuilder person.
Yep.
You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, vegan gains.
Yeah. It seemed to be based on like an egoist type of perspective.
Yeah, basically that like I'm not invested in animal rights because I don't think animals can like ever do anything to like hurt me or whatever, like on a broader thing. Yeah. I don't think animals can rebel or anything.
Yeah, so if you were gonna, you seem to be using like an ethical egoist argument there, unless I don't know what, because, well, to back up, how I would do this is I would specify a list of characteristics that I think make something
hey, happy 10
eligible
months.
for moral consideration.
Shelby.
List of characteristics. Why?
Well, I mean, there's no reason. So, but I think it's better to do that because you can get as foundational as possible. So you're not specifying something like humans are what I care about, like, because that's like a very high level, or like a very like, I don't know. That's
It's a broad category. There's a lot more specificity we could get there, whatever, or like more finite traits.
Yeah, sure. Or all you need is like Homo sapien 2. Like you just need like a second species or AI or whatever it may be, and then you have no moral obligations to them, which seems like something that we don't want. So like it seems to make sense to try to specify at the most fundamental level, like traits that you think are necessary. So that's how I would do it. You seem to have a different view. So
Happy
what is that? Like
birthday,
in response, like specifically for animals, what is your criteria for exclusion there?
Yeah, that they can never do anything bad to me. They're never gonna rise up against me. Like nothing bad is ever gonna come from me eating meat.
So that's like a, what is that? That's like a, that seems like ethical egoism to me. What
well, that's, I guess maybe there is no distinction here, but I'm just like describing the reality, and I don't believe that I can be like compelled to anything like I analyze that transaction that way. Animals can never do anything bad to me, so I eat animals. Fuck it. I don't know if I should say like I ought to eat animals or like I ought to like or whatever, but I mean I don't know. Ultimately, like I guess that's just my statement. Maybe we can call it ethical egoism. I guess if that's what we would say it is, but
okay. Would that also be? I think there's another term somebody used to describe that type of thing. It's like transactionism, but there's like a word for it.
maybe.
I've heard you say it before. I can't remember exactly what it is.
Some people say like social contract something. I've heard that.
Yeah, social contract. So it would that be what you're invoking there?
I mean, I try not to, but I guess you could see it that way. Sure.
Okay. So my problem with that is that you're specifying that because they can't reciprocate anything to you.
More specifically, they can't punish anything.
Okay, they can't punish anything. That would apply to anything to you, and you wouldn't be able to argue against it. So, for example, say AI or an alien species or etc. Says I would like to extract your entire Earth's water for resources.
Yep, I don't think you'd have an argument to stop them from doing so. If a greater supreme intellect with 17 senses came to our planet and they wanted to kill us, I don't think there's any like moral compulsion you could give them. Hey, you shouldn't do this because of this reason. I don't think you could. You'd have to fight for it.
But I mean, that seems undesirable because
well, of course it seems undesirable, but I mean, what are you gonna do?
Well, no, but like I would have an argument. So if that was posed to me, I would have an argument that I think creatures that are conscious and have some range of being able to be deprived or given things to make them happier or need to survive. That's a criteria for caring about them. I could make an argument. And so I think you would have to say it's actually perfectly fine for you to extract all the resources and kill me.
Well, yeah, but like how would but like you have no way to compel them to believe your argument. Why should they believe you?
Oh, you mean like going from like the very fundamental level?
Well, no, just like they come to your planet and they say, well, why the fuck should we listen to you? Like you have no way to compel them to believe you. They could just take all your shit. If they would be better off like in every single way, like.
Well, yeah, descriptively, they'd probably do it anyway. But I mean, the point just is that, like, I think that I should have a right to be alive.
Yeah, that's great. But if the other person doesn't respect it, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, does it? Right?
Yeah, I mean yeah.
So I guess like, yeah, so I'm looking for like,
true.
yeah, so descriptively, I just look for like descriptions. I just don't care about ought statements. I think they're meaningless. If I'm on an island with somebody and I have the perfect Kantian, categorically, imperatively correct like defense of why like another person shouldn't murder me and eat me, it really doesn't matter if that person has the capability to do so at the end of the day and they feel like it would benefit them. So like, I don't know, I just don't care about like moral statements in that sense. It seems like irrelevant.
Okay, I mean, I guess just what I was getting at is I would want to construct a moral system where if what I'm doing was applied to me, then I would be happy with it.
And if I could force other people to adhere to that, I would enjoy that. But I can't really do that without using force. So that's why that's why I feel like that position is a waste of time. Like I wouldn't want to live in a world of chaos, being the only person with a moral code, because you would just be handicapping yourself at the end of the day, right? Like let's say you lived in some post-apocalyptic dystopian future where everybody's murdering everybody. Like the only reason I would ever treat anybody else with kindness is because I think I could get something out of them at the end of the day. But otherwise, I'm not going to like handicap myself and fuck my own life over, knowing that I can't compel any other person to a particular moral system, right?
Sure. Yeah, I can see that.
So why handicap yourself?
Well, so for me, it's more of like a intellectual exercise to just try to make everything consistent and run through in a way that it doesn't run into each other itself.
Yeah, I agree. But at the end of the day, we're playing the same game, right? I value I value like my survival. That's like the thing that I appreciate the most. You seem to value like an intellectual consistency, but neither of us have a good reason for doing so, other than it's just like that's just what we like, right? That's just our choice.
Sure. Yeah. Fundamentally. Yeah.
So I guess like my ultimate goal. Here's my ready. Do you study philosophy formally?
No, I'm studying something
okay,
that
that's
you
good.
hate.
Because if you did, you'd probably kill yourself, because I say a lot of really dumb shit. Okay, I don't understand that. But like my dumb shit position on like all of meta ethics is I think every single moral system is post hoc rationalized. That's how I feel. You have some given outcome that you want, and then you'll use whatever moral system you can concoct to get there. My hypothetical for this, I'm curious if you have a response to this. My hypothetical is, let's say you take the most Hegelian, Kantian, whatever, some guy, total moral realist, has read every single work, he even learned German to study it, and he knows all the perfect moral realist arguments, and he believes in all of it perfectly, 100%. He's the most morally consistent person ever, okay? It lives universal norms, all that shit. Let's say that like a lost book of Kant was discovered. The lost book of Kant is discovered, and in this book is the most airtight, 100% foolproof, logically, deductively consistent, like moral code. And as part of this moral code, you're encouraged to rape children. I don't think that there is a single Kantian person that would be like, yes, quite. I think that the arguments are good. Like, let's embrace this. I think everybody would be like, okay, I'm ditching this shit, and I'm going to find something that feels better. I think that's like my feeling on what most people would choose. And I think this even happens all the time with, like, we see this with religious systems. And these are the people that should have the strongest convictions, where religious people, like, slowly change their, like, moral prescriptions over time so that it suits society better. And, like, have to flex, like, the Bible, like, pretty hard, or bend it pretty hard to get to, like, being okay with gay people, like, in a congregation and whatnot. That's what I feel.
Yeah, I feel like that's true. I mean, I don't have any issues with that. I mean, so like I think it's by definition post hoc, because we're not discovering things to come to conclusions about ethics. I mean, there's some caveats. I mean, so you can actually roast me on this. So I'm currently a vegetarian, should be a vegan, but that was based on my base criteria. Like that was a conclusion that I did actually come to based on why I think things are valuable.
Okay.
So I mean, there are caveats. Like that would be an example of a time where what you just said is not true. To the extreme, I think in general, and to the extreme, I think that's correct.
So then I would argue that like you're satisfying some intellectual curiosity that matters more to you than eating meat. That you derive like greater pleasure out of like being morally consistent, rather than the pleasure you would get out of eating meat is what it seems to be the case.
That and just having a criteria that like makes sense. Like what I do to a creature, for example, has some differential impact on it. Like that's like a very basic prerequisite. So like there are like some ways in which just it makes sense, and then there's just emotional argument that I just care about things that can suffer. But otherwise, yeah, I think satisfying an intellectual curiosity is fair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you don't have any criterias for moral evaluation of a statement at all?
Not really. I just look at, like, for me personally, I just look at what I feel like benefits me the most. That's typically, and I believe that most people do that. But the way that you value like different things like determines what benefits you the most. So for instance, I think eating juicy steaks is good. It tastes good. I think that's a big benefit to me. For other people, the discomfort that they get from consuming meat and the enjoyment that they get out of having what they perceive as like to be like logically consistent systems, I think gives them greater pleasure than eating meat. So I think they choose that. And that's typically how I analyze like most like quote unquote moral statements, is they reduce to some preference. So somebody says like murder is wrong. What I think they're really saying is I don't like murder, or I don't like this thing, is how I interpret most moral statements in like a non-cognitivist fashion.
Yeah, I mean, when people try to make objective statements about morality, I feel like they're making something of a category error, because, I mean, for one thing, whenever you say you ought to do something or ought not to do something, it's always in reference to a goal. And if you specify it that way, it's very difficult for people to say you should have X goal.
Well, kind of, but like so saying a statement in reference to a goal would be like a normative statement, right? Basically. But like
no. Maybe I should give an example to make that more clear. So if I were to ask you, should I dig a hole in my backyard? You would say no, or there's no answer to that question. It's only in reference to why I would want to do that.
Yeah, should you dig a hole in order to like grow plants? Wouldn't that be, that's like a normative statement, isn't it? A normative claim? You need to dig a hole in order
Yeah.
But not all, but normative claims aren't necessarily moral claims. Like, ought I respect my mother is different than should I respect my mother in order to be a good child or something, right? Those are two, even though those are both normative statements, like one is moral and one is not, right?
Yeah. Well, but I mean, you could say that like the injunction "you should not murder" is analogous to "you shouldn't dig a hole in your backyard."
I disagree. I think those are different. Go ahead.
Well, I think you're thinking that the reasons are implicit, but the reasons why you don't want to murder your mother are implicit. But
well, like when people say like you ought to do something and they're like making a moral statement, like that's like that reduces to some or relies upon some moral fact in order to say you should or shouldn't. So that normative statement relies on some moral fact, right? Like you ought to respect your parents, like is relying on some moral foundation, whereas like you ought to dig a hole to plant flowers or whatever is different, no? Those are different types of statements. It doesn't rely on like a moral fact, it just relies on descriptive ones. Or
what do you mean by moral fact here?
Like, so when you say something like you ought to respect your parents, like in order to be like a moral person, like this is aren't you like in order to make that statement work, aren't you relying on some sort of like moral fact that shows that like this is like what is morally good and this is what is morally bad? Like it's relying on more than just like straight descriptions of the world.
I think that it's relying on preferences that you have.
Well, oh yeah, no, I mean like that's what I would say, but I don't think that's what most people would say. Like if somebody tells me like you ought to dig a hole to grow plants, we can evaluate that statement. Like we can use like we have like truth values to some of these things. Like we know what a hole is. Nice. We know what a hole is. We know what a garden is. Like we know if we need to dig a hole in order to have a garden. But if somebody says you ought to respect your parents, being like a good person, there's no truth claims there. We can't evaluate that ever. Like everything's going to be like subjective as fuck. No?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I think we might have cut past each other slightly.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Because,
I might have a misunderstanding here as well. So sorry. Go ahead.
The only thing that I was pointing out was that it never makes sense to make a statement like you just shouldn't kill your mother. Like implicitly, or it's tacitly in relation to some goal, some ideal of morality that you would ever make such a statement. But this is usually just implicit, and we let it be implicit, and it's fine. But to say that could be objective, I think, is to say that a preference could be objective, which I think is categorically, it's a misunderstanding of what is meant by the word objective. But I think we agree on this. I was just pointing out my version. I don't know.
Okay. I don't know if we disagree, but okay.
I don't know if we disagree. I'm trying to look over my notes.
The only reason why a lot of people criticize egoism for being vacuous as fuck. And to some extent, I kind of agree. Like, everything you do is your preferences. It's almost a tautology. Well, of course, if you do something, you prefer to do it with the way you're defining preferences. The only reason why I prefer egoism is because I don't like it when people make, like, morally authoritative statements, like, where they pretend that, like, they can say, like, oh, well, this is, like, objectively true, and they use it to, like, rag on, like, moral relativism or other people's values or whatever. I just get uncomfortable when people do that, so that's usually why I, tend towards, like, an egoist description. I think it provides a good description of, like, where morality comes from, even if you don't get any, like, prescriptive statements out of it.
Okay, so this is where we might have a disagreement, but it's not a severe disagreement.
Okay.
I think egoism is a really bad framework for understanding that. I mean, you could just say you're a moral relativist, and it would do exactly the same thing. It would undercut those Sam Harris problems, like Sam Harris argument problems. And
okay. I think that I don't know if relativism and egoism necessarily like encompass the same things, because couldn't relativists still say that like maybe moral facts exist, but the moral facts change over time or something? Like, I don't know if they cover the same areas.
I've never heard that. I mean, that's possible.
Sure. All right. What I should say more broadly is I don't know if moral relativist necessarily implies anti-realism. I don't know if that's true or not.
I'm not sure, but I mean, egoism. Sorry, there's people saying weird things in my chat.
Okay.
But egoism certainly has implications. I mean, especially not specifying descriptive egoism, which, I mean, descriptive egoism is just as a matter of fact the case. I mean, but it doesn't have any implications. And when it's really confusing for you, if there's any implications, and you have an audience of people who are influencing, I think that can lead to some problems. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. I don't like psychological egoism. No, wait. Descriptive egoism. Psychological egoism is the one that gives you the prescriptions. I don't like that form of egoism because I feel like that gets really close to like a sort of like biological prescriptivism. So like I like to say that like here is an analysis that I have, and like I think this is how things work, but I don't like to make the jump and say this is how things work, therefore this is the right way things are. I'm uncomfortable with that. Does that make sense, or do you think that distinction is meaningless?
I don't understand how that.
Sure. Okay. So like, I would say that like people value their preferences. That's why people had slaves in early America. It was beneficial for slave owners to do so, and that's the reason why. End of discussion. Like that's it. But I would be uncomfortable saying because they had that preference, it was a morally correct thing to do. I don't like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. That's why. So like, I get scared of like a sort of like quasi like psychological egoism almost feels like biological prescriptivism to me, that like, oh well, if you have a preference for something, it must be a moral right, which I don't like that. I don't like that implication.
I mean, you don't have to say that, but I mean, there's the inverse of that as well. I mean, would you want to say that Abraham Lincoln was a terrible person for, although he freed the slaves, did view African Americans as intellectually inferior to white people? I mean, I would still say he was good in relation to his time, no?
I actually, like, if I'm having a conversation by myself or like with other people, if I'm not working within somebody else's framework, I actually try not to make statements of like this person is good or evil. I don't think those words reduce to anything meaningful. The only time I'll use good and evil is if I'm talking within the framework of somebody else's system and I have to evaluate things using their terms.
Okay, but I mean,
I'm sorry. Real quick, just to be clear, psychological egoism is descriptive egoism. I'm thinking the difference between descriptive egoism and ethical egoism. I think. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Go.
Yeah. So I don't think it would be fair to say that Abraham Lincoln is an evil person for. I mean, I guess if you don't want to use that terminology.
Mm-hmm. Well, because when you say somebody is good or evil, you're implying some like universal like moral standard. I think you're implying like a moral fact. That's what it feels like to me. To be able to say somebody is good or is evil feels like you're implying some moral fact.
But the fact that I'm answering the question with no, I think he was good in relation to his time suggests that that morality changes over time.
It could, yeah. Or it could imply that you still believe that there is a moral standard, but you assign less responsibility to people in earlier times as well, right?
That's a potential pitfall, yeah. I mean, that would be a misunderstanding. I mean, we're kind of talking about audiences misunderstanding what we mean by things.
Are you fucking serious? Watch this. Got him. Okay, sorry. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I try to be really clear with the conversations that I have, but I might fuck up sometimes. Yeah. Dude, I'm getting a lot of packet loss. You guys see these autos? Sorry. Okay, keep on.
What are you playing?
This horrible fucking game called League of Legends. It's not good.
I don't know. I play League of Legends.
Oh, well, you're making big mistakes with your life. Why would I attack him? Oh, cool, and I'm just full-on inting and wasting my sums.
I would like to point out that that game's learning curve is fucking immense.
League? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I just started it a while ago, but the fucking learning curve, god damn, I'm fucking getting...
Yeah, on all MOBAs, it's like pretty rough. Yeah, there's a huge barrier to entry. These games require like so much knowledge. Yeah, it's insane. I miss like the days of like I played real-time strategy growing up, so it was like mechanics were more important than like knowledge or strategy in those games. But yeah, okay, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I try to be clear when I'm talking about like my like good or evil or egoism or whatever. Like I try to be pretty clear with what I believe or what I think is good or bad or right or wrong. Like just because I say like descriptively this seems to be true, I try not to say that like therefore this is good. That's a statement I really try to avoid. Yeah, I really don't like talking about things in terms of like good or evil.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm not. So I think we roughly agree in a sense. I mean, so I was expecting it to go way differently. I was expecting
she's so
you to...
skilled, dude. Sorry.
Who?
Riven is such a good champion. Sorry, you expected to go differently? I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. Okay.
I expected you to take up ethical egoism, but...
No, I don't like making prescriptive statements. Yeah. Here. Because do you agree? I feel like ethical egoism is like a hop and a skip from biological prescriptivism.
Yeah,
which is super fucking disgusting, which is not good. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it even if you could analyze it from a utilitarian perspective too. I mean, if everybody's doing that and nobody's looking out for anyone else's interests, that will ultimately end up not maximizing your own interests anyway. So yeah, I think. Do you have like super SJW chat or like?
It goes back and forth. Not right wing for sure, but I would say we go back and forth between being like somewhat progressive and like I don't think my chat is like super woke or anything. Some people are, but
they're asking me what my gender is, but my gender is pretty obviously male.
Whoa, pretty obviously. Oh.
Anyway, yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I don't know if I'm insufficiently woke for that conversation, but I don't know. Let me think. I have a meme question for you. It's not really a meme question. It's more of like, if I have a question where if Sean Carroll were present, he'd probably smack me. But it's interesting anyway. So we both don't believe in free will, right?
Correct.
Or you don't. Yeah. So
I'm getting.
Are you familiar with the? Sorry.
Nope. That's
Are you familiar with the thought experiment of the Laplace's demon?
No, I'm not. Talk me through it.
Okay, so it's basically a thought experiment where if somebody had perfect knowledge of everything in the universe, down to like every quark and atom, they'd be able to predict everything with 100% accuracy, 100% of the time.
Assuming there's no weird quantum randomness that manifests on like a macro level or whatever. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But I mean, it's the odds of that manifesting on a macro level would probably be pretty minute, and they'd probably be able to
account for it. Sure.
Probabilistically account for it. Yeah. Okay. So they would, in essence, know everything that's ever gonna happen. They'd be able to predict the future and retrodict the past. That's taken straight from Sean Carroll.
Sure.
So my question is, that being seems theoretically possible. I mean, like, we hugely gain knowledge all the time and information.
That being seems theoretically impossible.
No, possible to me.
How? If anything could have perfect knowledge over everything, it would be a part of that system that, like, recursively, that never works, right? Because just being a part of that system would cause them to alter the system. Knowing what they would know as part of the system would alter what they could know, which would infinitely recur, right? Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Could you extrapolate on that or reword it?
Let's say that I could know every single, like, condition of the universe. You think you can actually fucking 1v1 me, you fucking piece of shit? Go back to fucking babysitting bot laners, you shitter. Let's say that you
That
could
would've
know
been
like
me.
every single part of the universe, right? Every single thing. You knew all the initial. Oh, this guy come up on me. You knew all the starting conditions and everything. It seems like if that were true, like you would be like a part of said system, so you would have like an impact on said system. See ya. And as such, like you wouldn't like it would. Does that make sense? Am I explaining this correctly at all? Do you understand or no? Or not? Do you understand? Am I explaining this?
Let me try to restate what I think you're saying.
Uh-huh.
Are you saying that just the
Me
fact of
versus
your
Pepe. Pepe wins.
knowledge
Psyche
or
wins. You need, but you
participation
will
in the
lose.
system that you're in would alter it?
Yeah, like if you
I
knew
might be
every single
totally
thing that could
misunderstanding.
happen in the universe, couldn't you go and change something, and then it would change the outcome of everything, or no?
Well, that's where I'm going.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
So this seems theoretically possible, like in an AI version or what have you.
Okay.
And so something, and even if you don't grant me everything, enough relevant variables to be able to predict certain things, like they're able to they have enough information to predict some things to a very high percentage certainty. What would happen if that thing tried to predict its own future? Like,
Oh yeah,
would it
that's
start
what. Yeah, so
behaving-
that's my thing. It's like I think it's called the paradox of information or something. Like I don't think you could do it because you could just
Well-
change any prediction you come up with. You would have to you can only know perfectly like systems that you're independent of. I think.
But then you would kind of have free will. No? I mean,
Well, no,
if
just
could-
because you can't know everything about your initial conditions and then make an impact of it doesn't mean that something else couldn't, right? Like another thing that's independent of your system.
Your initial. So you're saying that it'd be impossible for you to know your own initial.
So, like, let's say you could know
conditions.
everything about the universe, blah, 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 blah. Well, then you could change it, and that would change everything you know. There could be something independent of you. There could be something independent of you that could know how you would react to that with 100% perfect, like, knowledge, right?
Oh,
What am
yeah,
I
that's
doing?
true. But
I just hard answered.
I don't know how you multitask like that. It's insane. But I mean, like, I'm just paying attention. Like, I would never be able to multitask like that.
No, it's
But,
okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, but so in reference to itself, this
Mm-hmm.
being would have kind of something like free will, because either they would predict their own future and start behaving completely differently on the basis of gaining information. Like they would start behaving in ways that they don't intend, or they would be able to do whatever they want, in which case they would be violating their own prediction, which
Sure, but I mean, in that
this we're
case,
saying is 100% accurate.
you're basically saying everything that doesn't have perfect information has free will then, though, right? Like,
No. Wait,
Because, like,
well,
because-
say it again.
anything that doesn't have perfect information, because it couldn't have perfect information, because it wouldn't know all of its own, like, it wouldn't know, like, all of its own initial conditions, right? Or could it?
So I think it's theoretically possible to have enough information to where you could be like 98% sure that you were going to do something.
Well, but we're not when we
regardless
talk
of your
about
initial conditions.
well, when we're talking about determinism, though, we're talking about being like what 100% certainty, right? That no other thing could occur.
Yes, if that is necessary. Is that necessary? I mean, couldn't ultimately, I mean, with quantum strangeness, it'll come down to probability anyway, but it'll be like 99.999% probability.
Sure, maybe. Well, I thought we were ignoring like weird quantum stuff, but like maybe yeah. I don't know. I'd have to think about this a lot, I guess. Yeah, because how we define free will is like what this comes down to, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I want to throw it up there, but I'm thoroughly confident that if there was a celestial Sean Carroll watching over us, he'd be shaking his head in shame, because I'm pretty sure there's just an answer to this question. But I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Maybe. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, hey, I love you, buddy. It's been fun.
Yeah, man.
You have any other big things or?
I don't know. So I had to I did write a midterm in the midst of studying for this like conversation. Would you be down to do another one sometime?
You had to write a midterm for this conversation. Would I be down to have another conversation?
No. At the same time that I was like trying to come up with topics and like study your positions on things, I had to also write. Did I say midterm? No. It's just a term paper.
Oh, okay.
So like a term paper, and so I didn't get to write down as much as I wanted. So would you be down to do something like this again sometime?
Yeah, if you want to, sure.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll hit you up.
Okay. Well, hey, I love you, buddy. Be careful. Is there a lot of debt associated with college? Sure. Are there people that get degrees and don't get jobs? Sure. In general, does having a 4-year bachelor's confer like a 20,000 a year wage premium to you? Yes.